So, everybody hear me okay without the mic? I'm kind of a loud person. My name's Nick Ack. I'm with the Nebraska Farm Bureau. I want to thank you all for being here this morning. It's a beautiful Saturday. We appreciate you taking time out of your day. On behalf of the Hastings Area Chamber of Commerce and the Adams-Webster County Farm Bureau, we welcome you to this coffee. Thank you, Senator, for your time. Just a quick reminder, we're all adults and citizens. We'll be respectful. And we are hosting this coffee. Opinions may or may not be expressed or endorsed by the Chamber or the Farm Bureau, but we want you to share your thoughts and be respectful of your fellow citizen. With that, I will turn this over to you, sir. Take it away.
You didn't need the microphone.
I did. Yes, I got 5 kids. I'm used to yelling.
I understand. Well, it's good to be home. It's always good to come back to Hastings after spending some time in Lincoln. I do want to thank the Hastings Area Chamber of Commerce and the Adams County and the Webster County Farm Bureau for sponsoring this. They've been stellar in their support for sponsoring these coffees, and I appreciate the opportunity. So I don't know where to start. Monday will be, I think, day 74 of 90 days. And some of you may have paid attention on a daily basis and watched what goes on in the legislature. My heart goes out to you if that's what you do. If you got nothing else in your life to do, that's fine. But I appreciate people paying attention to what goes on down there, because it's necessary for you as a second house to know. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of drama this year, and it's the result of that drama has resulted in upsetting the normal course of how the legislature works. We have gotten far fewer bills addressed on the floor because time has been consumed, as you're well aware, by an ongoing filibuster by a handful of people. And that filibuster is an abuse of the filibuster process. Usually a filibuster is done on a bill at a time, and then we move on to another bill. But this has been an ongoing filibuster. Every bill that's made it to the floor has been a subject of filibuster by a handful of individuals there in the legislature. And the result of that is I hinted at, it's consumed a lot of time. Most bills that come to the floor will take, on general file will maybe take an hour, 2 hours, and not likely filibustered. And so we'll move through those bills relatively rapidly. And the result is we address a lot of issues and address a lot of bills. Now with the filibuster, every bill has been filibustered. So it's 8 hours on general, 4 hours on select, and 2 hours on final reading. It's a lot of time consumed, and it would be fine if that time was consumed with debate, but if you've watched and if you kept notes, you could make up a recipe book if you like. You could make up a list of stories that people tell their kids at home. Not legislative business, but it is what it is. A result of time being wasted and not many bills being addressed, the Speaker has chosen to allow the committees to group bills within their committees. Each committee has 2 priority bills. Let me back up. Each committee will have 2 priority bills. Typically, those are one bill, one subject matter bills. Since we have consumed this time, the Speaker has allowed the committee chairman to group a number of bills, 15, 20, 25 bills in each one of those committee priority bills. Now in Washington, they call that an omnibus bill. It happens a lot. I'm not really, none of us should be thrilled that we're mimicking what Washington does, okay? The downside to an omnibus bill, in the legislature, we call it a Christmas tree bill when we group those bills together like that. I call it a casserole because it's usually leftovers that you end up packaging together. But the result of an omnibus bill or a Christmas tree bill is this. When there's 25 bills grouped together under one bill number, and they may be from the same committee, but that doesn't mean each one of those bills has the same subject matter. Well, when you have about 25 bills under one bill number like that, you have 25 bills sponsored by 25 senators. You're pretty much assured of getting 25 votes for that bill, right? Because you got 25 individually sponsored bills under that Christmas tree bill. So all you need is about 8 more for 33 to break, for cloture to break a filibuster. That's the downside to it. You're committing other senators to vote for your omnibus bill or Christmas tree bill because they want their bill passed. And so the merits of each bill aren't really dealt with individually like they should be. Constitutionally, we have a requirement for a bill to be a one subject bill. And there was, in some I would say 25, 28 bills, 25, 28 different subject matters. Now yesterday we had a bill that was 2 bills combined. One was amended into another. The underlying bill was 574, which was Senator Kauth's bill, Let Them Grow Act. And what was amended into that was a bill that would, an abortion bill that would take it from 20 weeks to 12 weeks allowable for an abortion. That came about because a week prior to that we lost a vote on LB 626, the heartbeat bill. That was our first attempt to deal with the pro-life legislation to save unborn babies. And that bill was based upon the premise that once a fetal heartbeat was detected, abortion would not be allowed. Fetal heartbeat indicating there was life, and there would be no abortions allowed. There were exceptions for rape and incest and ectopic pregnancies, which would risk the life of the mother. That bill got defeated by 1 vote. So, alternatively, then, we amended in the 12-week exemption, or 12-week limit on abortion, into 574, the Let Them Grow bill. What was 574? The underlying bill, 574, was a bill that would restrict transitioning gender to the age of 19, which would mean there would be no surgeries allowed, or puberty blockers or hormonal treatments for children under the age of 19. The bill name is aptly named. It's Let Them Grow bill. The idea here was to allow children to reach some age of maturity before they altered their body permanently, either surgically or hormonally, to adjust or to change the impacts of their gender. And so that bill passed yesterday. It barely passed, but it got to 33 votes. So that was yesterday. We have, backing up a little bit, we have basically passed the budget, first round of budget. So that's a constitutional requirement. Should be happy to do that. We have financial well-being of the state's in good shape. There's been a lot of revenue, and there was a lot of revenue carried over. We've maintained rainy day fund at a proper level. I think it's 16% of the budget in a rainy day fund. So we have used due diligence in making sure that if we run into tough times economically, there's a rainy day fund to protect us. That's about my whole spiel for this morning. I'd rather open it up for questions because that would more likely address something that's on your mind. Yes.
What was the public opinion of percentage on the vote you did yesterday? What did the public think? Not the senator. What did the public think? Was there a large percentage that was for this or against this? bill?
Well, the only way I can gauge that personally is the email response that I get on that bill or any other bills, right? And it was, I would say it was about 5-1 in favor of a passage of that bill. Now, that's not a, that's not a scientific survey of any kind, but talking to other senators, that was kind of typically the case.
That was your email.
Yeah.
So you don't really know what the total public would believe in this. You are, percentage-wise, you're probably getting Republican people responding to you. So we really don't have a percentage-wise of the whole state.
No. And fortunately or unfortunately, when the process of electing people to the legislature from 49 districts is electing those individuals based upon how they appeal to their constituents and the way they think and how they would vote. So the reflection of the vote is ultimately that same thing, right? Statewide.
I did see some polls and what you're referring to, and the last poll I seen was 78% were in favor of this bill. So they do have some numbers on it. It isn't just a legislature. There's actually a
That's what I was
poll
after.
that was done, and that was a couple weeks ago. I wouldn't be surprised it's even higher than that now, where the information got out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's what I was after.
Yeah, I figured. Thank you.
With you terminating out this year, is there 2 or 3 different names you'd like to recommend as to who you'd like to see take your place?
Is that an offer?
Absolutely
That's how I heard
Hey,
it.
Steve Dewey said he would move
No.
the air. Move the air.
Well, that's an excellent question. I have, as you all know, on the previous coffees with me, I have brought that issue up and tried to encourage anyone that might be interested to talk to me. Don't have to, but talk to me if you want. I don't have a list. I don't even have a short list. Haven't had an overrun of overwhelmed by people saying, "Oh gosh, Senator, let me talk to you about running." And that's unfortunate. I think there will be some good people surface to the top. I mean, some people are thinking about it, I'm sure. I don't have a list of who those might be, but the unfortunate result of this legislative session, and the drama and the circus that's soap opera-ish type atmosphere that's taking place, the downside to all that is, a number of downsides. I expressed those earlier regarding how little legislation that's really passed. The other downside is people watching this who might be thinking about it will look at it and say, why in God's green earth would I do that? Right? And that's unfortunate. If they were watching the legislative process being done correctly by the rules and led with leadership that enforced the rules, people might say, yeah, I could do that. People still need to be thinking about doing that, because if good senators aren't down there, this will get worse, not better.
Thank you.
We should have this in the afternoon. We can have some beer or something.
Hi, Senator. First, I'd like to say thank you for all your hard work this session. You guys have really had to fight and done a good job, and I'm just so appreciative. I was wondering if you could also update us on what's happening with the voter ID bill, and then
Yeah,
the second question I have, if you have time, is I know there's been a lot of discussion about rules change that didn't, if I understand it, necessarily all take place at the beginning like you would have wanted. Is there any possibility of anything happening there? Thanks.
Get to start off with some good ones, Senator.
Well, it's a good one. It's an important one. There was a referendum, and thank you for that. I was instructed earlier by the camera gentleman over there to stand under this light because that would be the best for, and I said, light's not gonna help. But here we go. Monday, we will have the voter ID bill on the floor for general fund. So tune in for that. I would encourage you all, if you can, tune into that debate. So I'm on the Government Military Veterans Affairs Committee. That committee is responsible for dealing with the voter ID issue, which was passed by the public in referendum overwhelmingly, and it's a very important issue. So we've had several, and that referendum was carried by Senator Julie Slama, right? She did a stellar job in getting that accomplished and getting that across the finish line. So that bill came to the government committee, and we heard that bill. Now I got to say, just a little detail here about what happens and maybe should or shouldn't happen. On the day of that committee hearing, Julie Slama's bill, Senator Slama's bill, we had her bill in front of us. We'd had it for several days. The people that came to that hearing had that bill in front of them. 11 o'clock the night before, Senator Slama dropped a white copy amendment which would replace the bill, which was substantially different than her original bill. So we had a hearing on a bill that no one had a chance to read or understand. So that started that saga of drama on that issue in the committee. So subsequently, the committee, in conjunction with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, have worked to iron out an alternative bill to Senator Slama's, and that's the bill that we voted out or exec out of committee. Senator Slama had a good fundamental bill. There were a number of constitutional issues that both the Attorney General and the Secretary of State had issues with. And so the committee has come up with a conjunctive bill to take the place, to bring to the floor. Now the issue is going to be, well, I think the issue is pretty simple by the referendum, and that is that you need to show an ID when you vote. And this bill will do that. And it will not be the library card, okay? It'll be your driver's license or any other state issued ID, and it will be necessary to show that ID when you show up to vote. And for those that vote early or have provisional ballots later, but for those early voters, they will have to do the same thing. For early voting ballots, they will have to submit their driver's license number and or a copy of their state issued ID. It's about a 50-page bill. I've got it here. I could start reading it to you, and we could work our way through that.
We're gonna need some alcohol for
Gonna need some alcohol. But I would encourage you to tune in, because the debate's is gonna take apart that bill, section at a time, and people will have questions, good questions, and hopefully we can address those questions on the floor. So we'll pass an ID bill. If we don't pass it during session, guess what? We'll have a special session and we'll deal with it there.
As a pollster for Adams County, we haven't had to check IDs before, but the county ID doesn't have a photo on it. But would this be a legitimate one?
That's what we get when we register to vote.
Right. It will have to have a copy image of your
Okay,
of your
is
face.
the county going to offer those? Because without a driver's license, it's really hard to get an ID with a photo on it.
The state will pay for it and facilitate people getting photo IDs.
Yeah.
But if you got a driver's license, if you don't have a driver's license,
Well, yeah, I do, but there's a lot of people that may not.
Right.
The elderly people especially.
and on that issue, elderly people, for example, in nursing homes, they will have in their file, all nursing homes obviously have to keep a file of the residents in their home. We'll have a file, and it may not be necessarily a photo ID of them, of a driver's license, because they may have given up their driver's license prior to being in the nursing home. But there will be a file picture that will be taken
And that
in the
won't
file.
be restricted because of privacy and confidentiality rights. Residents' rights. Can they release it? But they would have to ask to
The
have it
resident would
released.
release it.
The resident would have to ask.
Yeah, the resident could just release it, then under that situation.
And I'm sure if they want to vote, they'd be
Yeah.
more than willing to do that.
That's- Yeah.
Your legislative aid just said it's not up on Monday. Monday's agenda didn't include 5:30.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Well, somebody, not, this is Rod Crow over here, by the way. Rod Crow is my legislative aide. I was misinformed, but not by him before. So somebody else told me that, and I was misinformed. So anyway, stay tuned, and it will be up this week, I'm sure.
Senator, I do have a question. It was handed to me by a gentleman beforehand. It reads like this: the City of Hastings Utility Department is currently installing smart meters on our homes and businesses. Adams County is bringing a data center to the area, a collection company which will gather information from the smart meters. Smart meters show exactly what utilities are used in our homes. Smart meters are read and controlled in a central location where the department can control our appliances, heating, and air conditioning. Some states and cities have banned smart meters because of their emissions. Is this a violation of our freedom and privacy? If so, how can it be prevented?
Wow. My wife thinks I need a smart meter. That may be an issue that we'll have to address at the state level. I mean, that's a great question. I would take this to the city council first. Maybe not. That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that, but it does sound a little intrusive to me. So I'll give this to Rod Crow, and we'll look at drafting language if we have to.
Yeah, my question's referring to the circus we've been through down here, that you've been through. What can be done about this? I mean, as far as censorship, expulsion, can the governor, does he have powers to step in? Because we've basically been rendered helpless down there by these few people. It seems real sad that there's nothing can be done. There should be, I guess, you know, you watch the national news, there's been some other states go through this, and there have been some repercussions. I'm not saying that's affects it all, but it slowed those people up. You know, I mean, is there anything could be done by you guys or the governor? Does he have any executive powers to step in?
No separation of power. The governor has no control over that, and he shouldn't, right? The question was asked about the rules. Earlier on, we were, and we did address changing some of the rules. And Senator Steve Erdman's the chairman of the Rule Committee, and he sits right next to me on the floor, and he's got that rule book open all the time, and he's highlighting the dickens out of it. And I've been helping him with some of the rule changes. So we have evidence what needs to be fixed if we can in the rules, and we will address those in a committee hearing for the Rules Committee. But let me be clear. Rules for the legislature are like laws that we have on the books, statutes for the state. At one level, they're only as good as the enforcement of the law or the rule, right? We have a pretty thorough rule book, and so we'll change some of them, some of the rules, but ultimately, if you don't have a sheriff that wants to enforce them, the rule book's kind of worthless. Right?
What do you need to do to change the sheriff?
Well, I don't want to throw the speaker under the bus too much here, but in this. But he has let this go go on. And it's set a precedent for the future of how things will continue to go on. I approached him on a rule that was affecting me on a bill. It was an E15 bill promoting E15 ethanol, and it came through my committee, Agriculture Committee. I'm the chairman of it, and it was on the floor and it was being filibustered. And by filibustering, what they do is they put procedural motions on early, right? That either procedural motion to send it back to committee or indefinitely postpone and so forth, and they spend hours on those procedural motions. The rule book is very clear. Now this is going to get boring. The rule book is very clear on the sequence of bringing a bill to the floor. The sequence is this: the introducer gets first time on the mic to introduce the bill, which it should be. Following that, the committee amendment, if there's a committee amendment, will be next to be presented on the floor. We had a committee amendment that basically replaced the original bill, so it was important to have that committee amendment spoke on the floor. Next in sequence is any other amendments by the introducer. And then there was two important words, and then other motions may be allowed, like those procedural motions I mentioned, indefinitely postpone, recommit to committee, and so forth. I think that's pretty clear language. Get the sequence of the three things, and then other amendments may be added. Well, we went through 8 hours of debate, and I was not allowed as committee chair to present the committee amendment, which was a white copy amendment that replaced the original bill. So we were spending 8 hours on the original bill, and that was not the committee amendment, right? And I took it to him several times during that 8 hours, and he said, well, that's not how that's been interpreted in the past. And my response to that was, well, Mr. Speaker, if it's been misinterpreted for 40 years, do we continue doing it? And he says, well, that's not the way it's been interpreted.
Do they have
So-
a parliamentarian?
We have a clerk who's basically a parliamentarian, and his response was the same. Or the response you'll often hear is, well, that's the way we're doing it is based on previous precedent. Every day we do anything down there is a new precedent, right? So that precedent argument to me is fruitless. Doesn't make any difference. So.
Because there's a very strong part of parliamentary procedure, which is orders of the day.
Mhm.
Why isn't that utilized? If they're going to follow parliamentary procedure, then the orders of the day dictates that you follow the agenda, which is what you just said.
Yeah, the orders of, basically what I described to you were the orders of the day
Okay.
for filing the bills, the sequence of how that takes place. Introducer, committee amendment, other amendments by the introducer, and then whatever procedural motions you want to attach, you can. But they jumped ahead of that rule. They allowed the procedural motion. Now, I know, shrug your shoulders. We're all down there shrugging our shoulders on a lot of these interpretations of the rules. So, the speaker's in a tough position, but he kind of put himself there. If you don't come out pretty strong as a speaker, you're going to be taken advantage of, and unfortunately, I think that's happened a lot. So, that's not a good answer for you, but we're going to address cleaning up some of the rules. And one of them is the secret ballot. We're still going to address that. The secret ballot issue is everything is supposed to be transparent down there. Good old Chuck Norris, when he invented the unicameral, made it perfectly clear that one of the reasons he wanted a unicameral was for nobody caught that.
I did.
Chuck Norris? Okay. It's George Norris. I threw Chuck Norris out there just to see if anybody's paying attention. But transparency was one of the key issues that he created the unicameral. Well, what's the first thing we do in the biennium is we elect committee chairs, speaker, and committee chair, executive board, so forth. And how do we do that? a secret ballot. A secret ballot. Everything else is transcribed and transparent. Everything we say, the votes we make. You see that board up on the front with the red and green lights indicating how we vote, yes or no, and if there's no light, present not voting, which is used way too much. But it's very transparent, it's very recorded, everything except probably one of the most important things and that is electing committee chairs and speaker. They hand out a piece of paper and you write down, there's nominations. You write down who you want for those positions. You as a voter don't know how I vote for the committee chair for Health and Human Services or Government Committee or any of the committees. You should know how I vote on those. Because if I run as a conservative, which I have, and I think I've tried my best to hold up to that, to run as a conservative, and then for committee chair, I vote for some liberal from Omaha to run Health and Human Services, you should know that I put that person in charge of Health and Human Services. And that's important because those committee chairs are very, very crucial, important, they have a lot of control.
I'm glad there's cinnamon rolls left over.
What kind of pushback can the state do against the federal government, or they're trying to ban chocolate milk from schools now?
They what?
Yes, that's the new ban they're trying to push now.
Now I am outraged.
Why is that? Why chocolate?
Banning chocolate milk from schools?
Yes,
Right.
that's what they want to do because of the sugar content.
Well, I've been a big supporter of Article 5 Convention of States. Maybe we should start another resolution for an Article 5 Convention of States to put in the Constitution that they can't outlaw chocolate milk. I don't know. The states don't have much authority over the federal government, and the federal government has way too much authority over the states. It's not the way the Constitution was written, but that's what we've acquiesced to. I would call my congressman and tell him that you love chocolate milk, and you know the kids do too.
Well, they won't drink milk at all if they don't get it, so.
Yeah, right.
Your sugar and white milk, too.
Yeah.
Sugar.
And there's sugar, beer, and whiskey. Senator, we have one. Yes, I'm sorry.
Senator, wondering what your thoughts are on, and I think the two bills have been put together now. This is with the NBOT, the transportation, on the bonding bill, and then the Building Nebraska Act being extended.
Now you're going to get out of my bailiwick. Do you have something on it right there? Do you know whose bill that is by chance?
No, I really don't.
That's fine. I think the issue is whether or not we can, which we haven't been able to do in the past, is bond for
Right,
road construction.
right.
I'm going to wait till I can talk to the sponsor on that. I don't know. I mean, I think I can see reasons why we haven't done it in the past, but I can conjure up some reasons why it might be a good idea in the future. But we don't want to get in debt, so that becomes an issue of whether or not the state has the authority to get into debt through bonding. I believe that's the nature
Well,
of
it's always
it.
been
Yeah.
pay as you go.
Pay as you go. Yeah.
And what about the extension for the Building Nebraska Act? Are you familiar with that?
Are you?
Well, a little bit.
Well, you're probably more familiar than I. No, help me out if you can.
Well, Building Nebraska Act, it's been funded by 1/4 of 1% of the sales tax to do special projects on building different part of the whole 275 going from Norfolk down. That's part of the Building Nebraska Act. This Hastings Southeast that hasn't started yet is part of the building. And there's a lot of these projects. Well, that's going to come to an end in, I think, 2033. It sounds like a long ways off, but we're you know, the Department of Transportation is looking at projects that far out to get things put together. And I really think that needs to be extended, and with this bill, it'll be extended to 2045. If not, it'll end, and all these special projects that have been done, that'll end as well. So that's my thought, and that's part of that. I can tell you what the bills was. It was LB 706, and both those bills now have come into LB 727, if I'm correct.
Well, I appreciate that you paid attention and extending it. At first blush, I would be very much in favor of doing that. You know whose bill that was?
706 was introduced by Senator Moser.
Yep.
Is that 706?
Senator Mosher, that makes sense. No, I'd be very much in support of that.
Okay.
Got to keep the roads.
Ice cream. What do you have a follow-up on the epic tax petition that's going around, numbers and that kind of stuff?
Good question on the EPIC option, which is the consumption tax, replacing property tax, income tax, corporate income tax, sales tax as we know it, and inheritance tax. It's a great question. We're in the process of petition drive for referendum petition, and I got Ms. Bickford back here, who has been a stellar part of the team in doing that petition drive. It's going very well. Every meeting that we have in conjunction with that, we'll have 100 people show up, 55, 60 people sign the petition. It's been very well received. The challenge with any petition drive is clearly getting enough volunteers to do, gather signatures. And so we're in the process of working with some people that have deep pockets to help us fund engaging and employing companies that do that process of gathering signatures. But we're off to a good start, and I'm quite convinced that we can get there. The momentum is very good, and I think we have petitions back here that if you're interested and haven't signed on to it already, at the very least get it on the ballot. There'll be plenty of time, plenty of discussion, and we can have discussion here if you've got questions about the consumption tax. It will put Nebraska on the map economically. There's no question about it. We passed a tax package down here in the legislature that, quite honestly, is a Band-Aid on an amputation in regard to our tax code. I contend that 30 years from now, there'll be a whole group of different legislators, different governor, and we will be talking about the same issues of property tax. It's not going to go away through the legislature. The only way it's going to be addressed is through the ballot and have people choose, the second house choose, make the decision. With property taxes, every legislator down there has had that one of the first bullets on their campaign material, going down and get property tax relief. For years. 30 plus years at least. And for the next 30 years, again, people will be campaigning, and that'll be one of their first bullets will be property tax relief. Well, it's not going to happen through the legislature. In 1965, you've heard this story before, but 1965, prior to 1965, the whole state was run on property taxes. State government was run on it, local government was run on property taxes. And I think it was Governor Tiemann in the legislature at that time proposed an income tax and a sales tax. And it passed the legislature. But in that process, they didn't stop collecting property taxes for the state government. And what happened, the public said, wait a second, Buttercup. You're not gonna put 2 new taxes on us and still charge us property taxes to run the state. So they ran an initiative petition at that time to disallow the state government to be able to charge property taxes to run the state government. And that overwhelmingly passed, and so as a result, the state government's run how? On state tax, income tax, and sales tax. And local governments run on property taxes. Well, that's all fine and good, but out here in the hinterland, how are the schools paid for? Property taxes, right? And that sounds fine too, except in the Constitution says the state is obligated to fund K through 12 education. The state is, not property taxpayers, the state is. Well, we haven't done that. Or we've done a miserable, poor job of that, of funding schools from the state level, particularly out here. Urban areas are equalized basically, and they get a lot of state funding. But out in western Nebraska, not so much.
Did you have a question?
Yes, on your consumption bill, do we have a list of what they're gonna be taxing us for? And what's the biggest thing that we consume that they can tax for?
Right. The question is there a list of things that they'll be taxing? The consumption tax is a pretty basic description, is all new consumption across the retail. Anything you buy across the retail level in all services will be charged a consumption tax. Now, I want to make it clear that business inputs are not charged a consumption tax. By definition, business inputs are not consumption. So if you run a machine shop and you're going to buy a new lathe, that will not be charged a consumption tax. If you're a farmer and you buy a new tractor, that's not going to be charged a consumption tax. So people will ask me, how can you do away with all these other taxes and replace it with a consumption tax of 7.5%? Doesn't make sense, does it? And the reason we can do that is currently there's about $61 billion annually of sales that are not charged sales tax. They're exempted. So if you multiply 61 billion times 7.5%, it's quite a chunk of change, in addition to sales that do get charged sales tax. But we're not collecting sales tax on $61 billion right now. So that's what's going to make up that gap, if you will, where on the surface it makes no sense if you give up property taxes and income tax and 7.5%. How are you going to do it? That's how that's made up. Okay?
The way your bill is wrote up,
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing we all consume is oxygen, and oxygen fits under your bill because it's a new consumption. And we're using it up. There's somebody out there that's gonna figure this out. I wanna find this stuff.
You
before
buy
guys do.
oxygen?
No, but.
I do.
This lady does.
I do.
There's people that put, I don't know what you can call it, they have rights to everything that's happening out here. And some of these bigger corporations have put rights on your bodily functions. So that guy's gonna walk in there and say, hey, you're doing this bodily function, we're gonna be taxing you. So
Well,
can you put that in there, that they don't take the oxygen tax?
Oh my God. Well, just so they don't.
They're tough questions, we'd like to know about them ahead of time.
Well, that's not a tough, that's a silly, I'm sorry. I'm gonna be kind of rude to you right now, but that's a silly
I'm
question.
not woke, I can handle it.
Well, that's a Michaela Kavanaugh question. Okay, no, that's not gonna happen. If that happens, you got bigger issues than the consumption tax, okay?
Yeah, we have bigger issues.
Yeah, we do.
Do we have any more
Anyway.
questions?
Steve, you know my position on education and what's happening at that. It seems like the worry about critical race theory, the sex education things, has kind of flew under the radar. Where is the stance of the educational problems that we're having, probably coming down the pike with our kids? And I'm not only talking about that, but the fact that the state has actually put out stuff, and we've addressed this with with the history and the civics that the state put on, the material they're using from Howard University. I mean, I shared that with you to give you an idea. It's so far left that they're pushing, our own state's doing it to our kids, and we're allowing that to happen. I just kind of want your take on that, what you've discovered since we discussed that actually several years ago now.
Well, so much of that has come to the surface in the last year or two, but it's been there under the surface for a long time, right? I'll get in trouble here for saying, one of the things I'm diabolically opposed to are monopolies. And second, on top of that, I'm diabolically opposed to monopolies that are funded by the state, right? The teachers union controls education. Teachers union controls a lot of what goes down there in the state capitol. We've had elections for the Board of Education, State Board of Education. Got some new players in there, and they're stellar. They're still a little outnumbered, so we have to get one more in there. But you know, look, the University of Nebraska takes up about 1/4 of our budget. 1/4 of our budget. And of course, they'll argue that the return on that is like 8 to 1, and which is, I'm sorry, that's kind of in the face of economics. And if it is truly 8 to 1 return to the university, then we should give them all of our budget, because it will grow the economy so well. No, there's a difference between education and indoctrination. And unfortunately, in a lot of the public, a lot of parents are starting to recognize this, that indoctrination is not the choice they want. And so, you know, it's hard for parents that are paying property taxes for their schools, and that's fine. They're paying part of their help to support the school system, and then turn around and find that the kids are being taught what they're being taught. During COVID, it was a real awakening. I don't want to use the word woke, but it was a real awakening on the part of a lot of parents, because the kids were home, you know, and studying remotely, and the parents got to see what they were studying. It's bad on them, they didn't pay attention before that, but it was pretty evident once they were online at home, and it's not good. You know, we have education courses now that put books in front of these kids that, you know, probably used to have paper covers on them in the bookstores, because you wouldn't buy them up, you wouldn't want pornography showing on the book stand when your kid walks through. That's a slight exaggeration, but not much. So anyway, I don't know how to answer your question. As a state, I would do a lot of the funding of the university and pour it into other purposes that would do the state rather. My parents' generation, at some level, my generation, is partially to blame for some of this in regard to, you know, my parents always said, well, you got to go to college. You know, you're never going to be anything unless you go to college. Well, that was fine and good, and I went, and I'm glad I did. But now, what they're getting most out of college is a lot of debt. And they're getting degrees that they can't functionally go out and get a job with. And ultimately, if you're not working, you're getting subsidized by the state. And so it's not a healthy situation we're in. But the university is pretty powerful down there. Pretty powerful. Any more questions? If not, Brenda Beckford back here has got petitions.
I want to back up on one comment you made,
Sure.
just so I understand.
So Senator, you mentioned that the state obviously is not run on the property tax. And property tax is a big concern for everyone. If I understand correctly, if the counties don't allow the values and the levy to be raised or increased, if they try to stop or cap that, the state will step in and set those values on the properties. Do I understand that correctly?
Currently?
Yeah.
It's probably true.
So if the state's really not supposed to be involved determining those property tax values. Because I asked this when everybody got their pink slips and we were at the meeting at the county and school board members were there. And I'm sure it was Hastings Public Schools that said, well, if we don't keep raising values on the properties and levies to generate the property tax that we need to run the school system, we just cap that or decreased it, the state will come in and set those values. Is that true? It's the way I understood it. Again, I'm just saying this is what I understood.
Well, I would say that's right. I would say that's right, but it's indicative of an arcane system, right? We say the state shouldn't be involved with that process, but we are. But they are. And you know, how often did you hear from our previous governor? Didn't lie when he said we gave you all about $1.2 billion in tax relief, property tax relief. Well, did any of your property taxes go down? No. Now, he wasn't lying, but what he was saying was about $1.2 billion was a reduction in the increase. It was a reduction in the increase. Because if they need more revenue, what do? They increase the levy, right? No. So you can chase that. Nothing more fun to watch than a dog chasing its tail, but that's what we're doing with property tax.
But they're still involved, even though they
Yeah.
might say they're not involved.
Yeah.
Or want you to believe they're not involved.
I think that's right. Okay. I haven't had a roll yet. Any more questions? If you know anybody interested in running, let me know.
You'll move to Crystal Lake.
Yes, sir. Well, yes, Brenda.
I also have one-on-one documents. Someone wrote this great thing about Nebraska slavery, and I have a little funky message. What they want. I also have some informational documentation if you want it on EPIC. We have like 101, we have a sheet called Debunking the Myth, and then someone wrote this great thing about Nebraska slavery with taxes.
Okay, there are two petitions. One is for the EPIC consumption tax, and the other petition is to exempt groceries. Right? We think that's crucial because lower income people pay a disproportionate money of their income on groceries, and they should not be held liable for consumption tax on groceries. We don't have a sales tax on it now, but we wanted it in the Constitution so that would be difficult to change in regard to exempting groceries. Okay? All right.
So if nobody has any questions, let's give, it's been a very trying session, a very interesting and educational one, I imagine, but let's give Senator Holler a hand. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, the right to carry has been passed. Has the governor signed it yet? There has been nothing at all in the papers here that said the governor had went ahead and carried or signed you'll be able to carry.
Yep, he did have a signing ceremony. I was in the back row, so you couldn't see me, but that's fine. But yes, he did have a signing ceremony.
Okay.
For clarification, can you tell us when that will take effect, Steve?
Ooh.
'Cause it didn't have an emergency.
90 days after the session closes.
So we're talking September.
Yep. Thanks for asking that, that's September. Which reminds me, I gotta renew my concealed carry permit anyway.
You think this is a good idea?
I do.
Personally?
Mhm.
So if I have a gun in my possession, and I don't know if you do or not, I can walk up and shoot you, and you can't do anything about it because you won't have time. Now, this is a problem that I would be afraid of you, and you'd be afraid of me, but if I'm not afraid of anything, I can go up and shoot anybody I want before they would even have time to think, drawing their pistol or whatever.
Would you do that?
I would,
Okay,
but somebody
we're
else
good.
might.
The bad guys are carrying anyway.
Yeah.
That's right. The people that were most opposed to constitutional carry were criminals. And here's why. If after it's passed and more people do start to be able to use the Second Amendment and constitutionally carry, they're going to be law-abiding citizens. No, but criminals already carry. They carry without a permit.
So they're going to make more criminals.
No.
Possibly will.
No, if a criminal wants to be a criminal, they're going to be a criminal. I want more people. I want a criminal to go into a mall and look around and say, you know, there may be a lot more people here carrying than there used to be. I think I'll behave myself. Okay. Now, and some people started talking about, well, we need, how about training, right? For those people that want to constitutionally carry. There will be programs available, and they'll be pretty much offset cost-wise for training. But I jokingly suggested that next year I'm going to sponsor a bill that would require all criminals to take a firearm safety course.
Okay, my next question would be.
That was supposed to be funny.
My next question would be, why do the police chiefs and county sheriffs and so forth oppose this bill?
Well, there was like 90 or 89 sheriffs, county sheriffs that signed on to it.
Okay, I'm talking about like Lincoln and Omaha.
Lincoln and Omaha.
Both of
We gotta keep in mind.
Both of those city police chiefs oppose this bill. These are two of the largest cities in the state. And why do they oppose it?
I may be wrong. I think the Lincoln police chief was recruited from San Francisco.
Correct. And they're local.
No, well, she was voted in. She appointed her. I think that's right. So, I mean, there's certain things that we can expect from a liberal community, and certain things we can expect from a conservative community. I'm not surprised that they were opposed to it, but they finally, at the tail end, they came in neutral on it. They didn't come in opposed to it, they came in neutral.
I just looked at what happened in Texas, and their murders and so forth have went up considerably because of their governor signing on bills for people to carry and so forth. And I'm just wondering, are we going to become a Texas?
I think Texas has more of a problem with murders because they got an open border on the south.
Right. Immigrants.
Anyway, yes.
Right now, it depends on what county you're in. You can have a holstered gun, and they can go ahead and pick you up for having a concealed weapon, is what I've been told. In another county, you can go ahead and have a gun that is in a holster, and you're legal. Other counties will not. I go out mushroom hunting. I see bobcats, I see all kinds of stuff. If I have a holstered gun, I'm illegal unless I have a concealed carry. In another county, I can go ahead and have a holstered gun, I can go hunt for mushrooms, not a problem. So that's what it depends on. Which county, what law enforcement agency, state patrol, county sheriff, or police. They've got their own laws. There's nothing flat straight. So this concealed carry is going to keep me legal, although I very seldom ever carry a gun. But when I go out mushroom hunt, yeah, I'm going to carry a gun. I come up on some bad stuff.
You know, before you qualified that about the bobcats, I was going to ask you what caliber you use on those mushrooms. Thanks, everybody. I enjoyed being here with you.
I think there's still some cinnamon rolls and coffee, folks. I know Mickey does not want to haul the cinnamon rolls out, so leave them.
Nick's got 5 kids. You can take them.